Before we ever learn our own name, our brain is already writing our story. Every thought you've had, every fear you've faced, every dream you still carry lives inside a vast, living universe of cells and signals. Today, we stand at a rare moment in history where new eyes, powerful enough to see the invisible, are letting us map that universe. And in doing so, we are beginning to understand ourselves. The brain as a living network, not a static organ for much of human history, the brain was imagined as a fixed control center, solid, unchanging, and mechanical. Today, neuroscience reveals a far more powerful truth. The brain is a living, breathing network, constantly reshaping itself in response to experience, environment, and time. It is not a rigid machine, but a dynamic system made of billions of neurons, each forming and reforming connections every moment of our lives. At its core, the brain operates through networks rather than isolated parts. Each thought, emotion, or action emerges not from a single neuron, but from vast groups of neurons communicating together. These cells exchange information through electrical impulses and chemical signals, creating patterns of activity that shift from second to second. Even at rest, the brain is never silent. It is always active, predicting, adjusting, and preparing. What makes this network truly alive is its ability to change, an ability known as neuroplasticity. Every time you learn something new, practice a skill, or experience strong emotion, the brain subtly rewires itself. Some connections strengthen, others weaken, and new pathways can form entirely. This means your brain today is not the same brain you had yesterday. Experience leaves a physical trace in the network itself. Modern neuroscience has shown that this adaptability is not limited to childhood. While early life is a period of intense brain growth, adult brains remain remarkably flexible. Learning a language, changing habits, recovering from injury, or even shifting patterns of thought can alter neural networks well into old age. The brain is less like a finished structure and more like an ongoing construction site, always updating its design. Understanding the brain as a living network also changes how we think about behavior and mental health. Anxiety, focus, motivation, and memory are not simply traits you have or lack. They are patterns within networks. When certain circuits become overactive or underconnected, behavior changes. This perspective opens new paths for treatment, not by fixing a broken brain, but by reshaping networks through training, environment, and targeted intervention. New imaging technologies now allow scientists to observe these networks in unprecedented detail. Instead of looking at single cells in isolation, researchers can map how thousands or even millions of neurons interact. These maps reveal that brain networks are organized, yet flexible, capable of stability when needed and rapid change when required. This balance between order and adaptability is what allows humans to think creatively, learn continuously, and survive in complex environments. Seeing the brain as a living network also carries a powerful human message. It means we are not permanently defined by our past mistakes, limitations, or fears. The same networks that once adapted to survive hardship can adapt again to build resilience, focus, and growth. Every intentional action, sleep, learning, movement, reflection sends signals through this network, shaping its future structure. In the end, the brain is not just something we use. It is something we are constantly becoming. Each moment of attention, curiosity, and effort leaves its mark. By understanding the brain as a living network, we begin to understand ourselves not as fixed beings, but as evolving systems capable of change, growth, and transformation at every stage of life. How new microscopes see neurons in action for decades, the brain remained one of the greatest mysteries not because we lacked curiosity, but because we lacked the tools to truly observe it. Neurons are incredibly small, fast, and densely packed, making their activity difficult to capture in real time. Today, that limitation is rapidly disappearing. New generations of microscopes are allowing scientists to watch neurons in action, revealing how thought, movement, and emotion emerge from living tissue. Traditional microscopes could only show static images, frozen moments of brain structure. While valuable, they told us little about how neurons actually function. Modern imaging tools have changed this by combining optics, genetics, and computation. Techniques such as two-photon microscopy, light sheet imaging, and advanced fluorescence methods now make it possible to observe neurons firing as they communicate with one another, even deep inside the brain. One of the most revolutionary advances is the ability to track neural activity over time. By using special molecules that glow when neurons fire, scientists can visualize electrical signals as waves of light. This turns invisible brain activity into something we can see and measure. For the first time, researchers can watch how networks activate during learning, decision making, and emotional responses. These microscopes also allow scientists to study the brain in living organisms rather than isolated tissue. This is crucial because the brain behaves differently when it is alive and connected to the body. Observing neurons in their natural environment reveals how sensory input, movement, and internal states influence neural activity in real time. The brain is no longer a black box, it is a system in motion. Another breakthrough lies in scale. Earlier methods focused on small groups of neurons, often missing the bigger picture. New microscopes can capture activity across thousands or even millions of neurons simultaneously. This large-scale view shows how individual cells contribute to broader brain networks. It becomes clear that no neuron works alone. Meaning arises from coordination across vast neural populations. Advanced imaging also reveals that neural activity is not random. Patterns emerge, repeating sequences of activation that correlate with behavior and learning. These patterns help explain how memories form, how habits develop, and how skills become automatic. Seeing these processes unfold in real time transforms abstract theories into observable reality. Importantly, these technologies are not just expanding knowledge, they are reshaping medicine and mental health research. By watching how neural circuits change in disease, scientists can identify where communication breaks down. Conditions like Alzheimer's, depression, and epilepsy can now be studied at the level of real-time neural dynamics, opening the door to more precise interventions. New microscopes also highlight the brain's remarkable adaptability. When learning occurs, researchers can see networks reorganize themselves, connections strengthen, timing improves, and efficiency increases. This visual proof of neuroplasticity reinforces a powerful idea: the brain is always capable of change when given the right conditions. In essence, these microscopes act as a new language for neuroscience. They translate electrical signals into images, activity into patterns, and mystery into understanding. By seeing neurons in action, we are not just observing the brain, we are witnessing the biological foundation of thought itself. And with every improvement in these tools, we move closer to understanding how the mind truly works, from the smallest cell to the largest network. Mapping connections at unprecedented scale, the human brain is often compared to a universe, not because of poetry, but because of sheer complexity. Inside it exist billions of neurons forming trillions of connections, creating pathways that shape every thought, memory, and emotion. For the first time in history, science is beginning to map these connections at a scale once thought impossible. This shift is transforming how we understand the brain from isolated regions to a fully connected system. In the past, brain research focused on small sections at a time. Scientists would examine a slice of tissue, identify a few neurons, and infer how larger systems might work. While these studies laid essential foundations, they could not capture the full picture. The brain does not function in fragments. It operates as a vast, interconnected network. Modern mapping techniques are now allowing researchers to trace connections across enormous regions of the brain simultaneously. This large-scale mapping, often referred to as connectomics, aims to create detailed maps of how neurons are wired together. Using higher-resolution microscopes, automated imaging, and powerful computational tools, scientists can now follow individual neural pathways across massive datasets. What once took years to analyze can now be done in months or even weeks, thanks to advances in machine learning and data processing. One of the most profound discoveries from large-scale mapping is that brain organization is both structured and flexible. Certain pathways are highly conserved, forming reliable circuits for vision, movement, and basic survival. At the same time, many connections vary between individuals and change over time. Experience, learning, and environment continuously reshape how neurons connect, meaning each brain is uniquely wired. Mapping at scale also reveals how distant brain regions communicate. A decision you make in a fraction of a second may involve sensory areas, memory centers, emotional circuits, and motor regions, all working together. Large-scale maps show how information flows across these areas, revealing communication highways that support complex behavior. This challenges older models that assigned single functions to isolated brain regions. Another critical insight is the importance of network hubs. Certain groups of neurons act as central connectors, coordinating information across multiple systems. When these hubs function well, the brain operates efficiently. When they are disrupted, widespread effects can occur, contributing to cognitive decline or mental illness. Understanding these hubs offers new ways to interpret brain disorders as network-level problems rather than localized damage. These expansive brain maps are also redefining how we approach disease. Conditions such as autism, schizophrenia, and neurodegenerative disorders often involve subtle changes in connectivity rather than obvious cell loss. By comparing healthy and altered connectomes, researchers can identify patterns that signal early dysfunction. This opens possibilities for earlier diagnosis and more targeted treatment strategies. Beyond medicine, mapping connections at scale reshapes our understanding of identity and behavior. Skills, habits, and personality traits emerge from repeated patterns of connectivity. The brain you have today reflects the networks you have reinforced through experience. In this sense, brain maps are not just scientific tools. They are records of how life leaves its imprint on the nervous system. Ultimately, mapping the brain at unprecedented scale is about more than data and diagrams. It represents a shift in perspective from seeing the brain as a collection of parts to understanding it as a deeply integrated whole. As these maps become more complete, they will not only explain how the brain works, but also illuminate how change, learning, and human potential are wired into our biology. Discovering hidden patterns behind behavior, human behavior often feels unpredictable, shaped by choices, emotions, and circumstances that seem deeply personal. Yet beneath every action lies a complex web of neural activity, quietly guiding how we think and respond. With the ability to map the brain at massive scale, scientists are now uncovering hidden patterns within this activity, patterns that explain why we behave the way we do, often without conscious awareness. For many years, behavior was studied mainly from the outside. Psychologists observed actions, measured responses, and built theories based on outcomes. While these approaches offered valuable insights, they could not fully explain what was happening inside the brain at the moment a decision was made. Large-scale brain mapping now bridges that gap, revealing how specific patterns of neural activity align with behaviors such as fear, motivation, learning, and self-control. One of the most striking discoveries is that behavior emerges from repeated neural patterns rather than single events. When you react quickly to danger, focus deeply on a task, or fall into a habit, your brain is activating well-established circuits that have been strengthened over time. These circuits fire in predictable sequences, allowing the brain to respond efficiently. What feels like instinct is often the result of deeply trained neural pathways. Mapping these patterns also reveals why behavior can be so hard to change. Habits, both good and bad, are encoded in stable networks that the brain prefers to reuse because they require less energy. When certain circuits are repeatedly activated through routine, stress, or reward, they become dominant. Large-scale maps show how these dominant pathways can override new intentions, even when we consciously want to act differently. At the same time, these brain maps offer hope. They demonstrate that behavior is not fixed, but flexible. When new patterns are practiced consistently, the brain begins to reorganize itself. Weak connections strengthen, alternative routes emerge, and behavior gradually shifts. Seeing these changes at the neural level confirms that transformation is a biological process, not just a matter of willpower. Hidden patterns also explain emotional responses. Fear, anxiety, and pleasure arise from coordinated activity across multiple brain regions. Mapping at scale shows that emotions are not isolated to a single center, but are distributed across networks involving memory, sensation, and prediction. This explains why past experiences can shape present reactions, and why emotional responses sometimes feel disproportionate to the situation at hand. These insights are especially powerful in understanding mental health. Disorders such as addiction, depression, and attention difficulties are increasingly viewed as disruptions in network patterns rather than simple chemical imbalances. Large-scale brain mapping reveals how certain circuits become overactive or disconnected, leading to persistent behavioral loops. This perspective opens the door to treatments aimed at retraining networks through therapy, learning, and targeted interventions. Beyond clinical applications, uncovering hidden neural patterns reshapes how we view responsibility and growth. It encourages compassion for ourselves and others by showing that behavior often reflects underlying brain organization rather than moral failure. At the same time, it empowers change by highlighting the brain's capacity to rewire through deliberate practice and supportive environments. In essence, discovering the hidden patterns behind behavior brings science closer to the human experience. It connects biology with choice, structure with freedom. As we continue to map the brain at scale, we gain not only a deeper understanding of behavior, but also a clearer path toward intentional living where awareness, repetition, and environment can reshape the very networks that guide our actions. What brain maps reveal about learning and memory are often thought of as abstract mental abilities, things we have or lack. Modern brain mapping is changing that view by showing exactly how learning and memory are physically built into the brain. At a large scale, these processes emerge from patterns of connections that strengthen, reorganize, and stabilize over time. Brain maps are revealing that every lesson learned leaves a measurable imprint on neural networks. At the most basic level, learning occurs when communication between neurons changes. When you encounter new information or practice a skill, certain neural pathways become more active. Repeated activation strengthens these connections, making them faster and more efficient. Large-scale brain mapping allows scientists to observe these changes across entire networks rather than just individual cells, offering a fuller picture of how learning unfolds. Memory, in this context, is not stored in a single location like a file on a computer. Instead, it is distributed across multiple brain regions that work together. Brain maps show that memories involve coordinated activity between sensory areas, emotional centers, and regions responsible for decision making. This distributed structure explains why memories can be triggered by sights, sounds, smells, or emotions, sometimes long after the original experience. One of the most important insights from brain mapping is the difference between short-term and long-term learning. Early learning activates temporary networks that are easily disrupted. With repetition, sleep, and reinforcement, these networks stabilize and become long-term memory circuits. Large-scale imaging has made it possible to see how sleep, in particular, reorganizes brain activity, strengthening important connections while pruning weaker ones. This reveals why rest is not optional for learning. It is essential. Brain maps also highlight the role of emotion in memory formation. Experiences tied to strong emotions activate wider and more persistent networks, making them easier to remember. This is why emotionally charged moments often remain vivid, while neutral information fades quickly. Understanding this connection helps explain how motivation and attention dramatically influence learning outcomes. Another powerful discovery is that forgetting is not a failure, but a feature of the system. Brain maps show that unused connections weaken over time, allowing the brain to remain flexible and efficient. This pruning process prevents overload and makes room for new learning. In this sense, memory is a balance between stability and adaptability, a system designed to prioritize what matters most. These insights have profound implications for education and skill development. Learning is not about forcing information into the brain, but about shaping networks through repetition, relevance, and recovery. Brain mapping supports strategies such as spaced practice, active recall, and sleep-based consolidation, all of which align with how neural networks naturally operate. On a personal level, understanding learning and memory at the network level can be deeply empowering. It reframes ability as something that grows with practice, rather than something fixed at birth. Each time you struggle with new material, your brain is actively rewiring itself. Difficulty is not a sign of failure, it is evidence of change taking place beneath the surface. Ultimately, brain maps reveal that learning and memory are living processes, continuously shaped by experience. Every book read, skill practiced, and lesson revisited alters the brain's wiring in small but lasting ways. By understanding this biological foundation, we gain the ability to learn more effectively, remember more deeply, and appreciate the remarkable adaptability built into the human brain. How this technology reshapes the future of neuroscience, the ability to map the human brain at scale, is not just a scientific milestone. It marks a turning point in how neuroscience itself will evolve. For decades, progress in understanding the brain moved in careful, incremental steps, limited by technology and scale. Today, powerful imaging tools, advanced computation, and large-scale brain mapping are accelerating discovery at an unprecedented pace, fundamentally reshaping the future of neuroscience. One of the most immediate impacts of this technology is integration. Neuroscience has long been divided into subfields: molecular biology, psychology, anatomy, and behavior, often studied in isolation. Large-scale brain mapping connects these layers into a single framework. Researchers can now link genes to cells, cells to circuits, and circuits to behavior. This unified approach allows scientists to ask deeper questions about how biological mechanisms translate into real-world actions and experiences. The future of neuroscience will also be driven by data on a scale never seen before. Brain maps generate massive datasets that capture structure, activity, and connectivity across entire systems. While this complexity presents challenges, it also opens the door to discoveries that were previously invisible. Patterns emerge not from individual experiments, but from comparisons across thousands of brains, revealing shared principles and meaningful differences. Artificial intelligence and machine learning will play a central role in this transformation. Human analysis alone cannot fully interpret the vast amounts of data produced by large-scale brain mapping. Intelligent algorithms are now being trained to detect patterns, predict outcomes, and identify anomalies within neural networks. This partnership between neuroscience and AI is not replacing human insight, but amplifying it, allowing researchers to see relationships they might otherwise miss. Clinically, the future impact is profound. Brain mapping technologies are shifting medicine from symptom-based treatment to precision neuroscience. Instead of diagnosing disorders solely by behavior, clinicians will increasingly rely on network-level brain signatures. This could enable earlier detection of neurological and psychiatric conditions, personalized interventions, and more effective therapies tailored to an individual's unique brain organization. These advances will also transform how we approach brain health across the lifespan. By understanding how healthy brain networks change with age, scientists can identify protective factors that support resilience and cognitive longevity. Interventions may focus not only on treating disease, but on strengthening networks through learning, movement, sleep, and environment, turning prevention into a central goal of neuroscience. Beyond medicine, large-scale brain mapping will influence education, technology, and society. Insights into attention, learning, and decision-making can inform how we design schools, workplaces, and digital environments. As we learn more about how the brain adapts to stimuli, we gain the ability to create conditions that support focus, creativity, and well-being rather than overload and distraction. At the same time, this technology raises important ethical questions. Mapping the brain so deeply forces us to consider privacy, consent, and how neural data should be used. The future of neuroscience will require not only technical innovation, but thoughtful guidelines that protect human dignity while enabling progress. Ultimately, large-scale brain mapping is reshaping neuroscience by expanding both its reach and its responsibility. It moves the field from observation to understanding, from description to prediction, and from reaction to prevention. As this technology continues to evolve, neuroscience will no longer be limited to studying the brain. It will help guide how humans learn, heal, and thrive in an increasingly complex world.